not notice the complaints about Street Fighter 6 from
Yo,
pro
Mosh Pit,
players
welcome
like
in,
Tom,
fam.
and even sometimes Mina are.
Yo, chat, listen, I need a big favor from y'all. I'm gonna need y'all to click that follow button for Mosh Pit, please. Thank you. Please and thank you. Nothing. You would. You would. You that kind of guy. Let's go watch this video.
But do their opinions really influence the broader community at large?
So you actually think the complaining hurts the game?
A lot of the folk that could be finding solutions and finding answers, they just kind of bandwagon with like the top players and they're whining and complaining.
What about the meta? Has it shifted? We went from having Ken versus JP in almost every grand finals at the beginning of the game to having characters such as Luke and DJ dominate the latter portion of the season.
Do you feel as though the game has been, well, quote unquote, figured out, or this is the highest it can
Send
go
the
at
link,
this
ignorance.
scratch?
I do think that the meta has
Send that shit,
shifted
we want people.
as opposed to the earlier part of the game, but I don't think much has changed.
Now, both of these questions and more will be answered in this sit-down conversation.
Both of these
that I
questions
had
and
with
more
my homie.
will be answered if you just stick around. Make
I
sure to
also
like,
feel
follow, and
as
subscribe.
though, like, although the game is in a fairly, it's a good spot for a vanilla game, right?
Yeah.
It's in a good spot for that, but I also feel like no matter what they end up adding, no matter what they end up changing, the NA scene is going to complain.
Yo,
And
nothing. It's going good.
That is a
We
very unfortunate,
next podcast is on Sunday.
inevitability that we're gonna have
Sunday
to go
night, 9
through,
o'clock.
because no matter what they do to this game, no matter who's top tier, it's just gonna be a wave of like complaints, right? Like,
Yeah.
if they nerf Luke's crouching medium punch, they're gonna start complaining about suppressor. You know what I mean? Like, they're just going to find something to complain about, because there's always gonna be something that they're not gonna like about a game. And I think honestly that hurts the game a lot. I think it does hurt the game,
The
right?
complaining. So you actually
Yeah.
think the complaining hurts the game?
I think it not only hurts the casual scene, it hurts the competitive scene, because a lot of the folk that could be finding solutions and finding answers, they just kind of bandwagon with like the top players and they're whining and complaining, right? And then instead of like, okay, let me sit down, let's figure out some answers, whatever, woo, they're just like, man, he was random. Man, Sway is cheap, you know? Man, drive rushes ain't fair.
Right.
Man, perfect parry is random. Right? And instead of like, let's find answers, let's pull up our pants and deal with this issue like as I don't want to say as men, but as grown people. You know what I mean? Well, even then, not all of us are grown like that.
yeah.
But, like, you know,
Yeah, right, yeah.
but like, you know, like let's deal with it, you know, instead of just being like, all right.
Yo, by the way, shout out to Narukami 2D for the video. Shout out to him.
Well, the loss. Time to pull out the iPhone, boot up X. Let's complain, right? Because a lot of them feel like if that's what the top players are doing, that means that's the highest this game can go. Do you feel as though the game has been, well, quote unquote, figured out, or this is the highest it can go?
This is what I'm curious, if
I would
Street
say
Fighter's been
this.
figured out yet.
I'm gonna go back to what you said earlier when
Let me know
I'll
what
come
y'all
back
think
to
in the
this
chat.
later. In terms of the complaining, I've come of the mindset that it does suck, but I don't think it does as much damage as is being perceived. I come from Street Fighter 5. That was my main game. The amount of complaining that was on that game,
Street Fighter
and
5
the way
crazy.
that game came out, yeah,
For
there's
Street
still
Fighter
people
5 to
that
be
had
your main
complaints
game's
about it,
crazy.
but, like, by the end of the game, it was universally accepted that 5 was a good game, to the point now where people are like, oh,
That's
man,
also
I'm gonna
true,
go back
though.
to playing 5.
He's spitting facts.
Right. And so I watched the narrative of that stuff change. So the complaints in the game, when people are complaining, I don't think it matters as much people think, because at the end of the day, if they keep improving on the game, which I think they're going to do, it's
I mean,
going to end up to a
ignorance.
game
Was
where
that the
yes, there's
case
still
with
gonna be
Smash?
people
I hear
complaining, but at the
Smash
end of the day,
people are
no one's
still
gonna be
figuring
like,
it
well, this
out.
game isn't skillful, right? They're gonna have to acknowledge that, yo, this game has some skill, has some mind games behind it, right? And that happens once they clean up a lot of the stuff. But I will say, in terms of where we're at right now, we're Street Fighter 6. I think for a game that's been out for how long has it been?
Smash
out
is
for?
a wild
Couple
game. I want to say it's
months?
buns. It's definitely wild.
Let's say about half a year now, give or take.
Yeah, half a year.
6-7 months.
I feel like it's been almost 2 years worth of adaptation for this game. That's what it feels like, right? Because every time you turn around, there's something new. And I do think that the meta has shifted as opposed to the earlier part of the game, but I don't think much has changed. Well, you know, because some certain characters that were considered strong, they kind of fell off the wagon that most people didn't even put them in their top 5 now. So like Jury was considered strong. She's kind of slid out of most people's top 2s, top 3, and kind of went to like 6th or 7th or 8th. And other characters have risen, such as, you know, like Luke, Chun-Li. So I do think the meta's changed, but I think where we are right now, there is tech still to be discovered and still to be implemented in terms of like characters, but I don't think it'll make much of a difference to where the meta is going to shift. So I think we've kind of tapped out where
I think the game still got room to get figured out.
If we were to wait a couple more
I think
months
it's
after,
mostly figured out, but there's still stuff that
right now,
we can see.
I think it's pretty much almost maxed out. We know who the top tiers are. We know the good combos to do. Granted, there's always more combos that people can learn. We know some of the strategies to deal with some of the stuff.
I'm with you on that, ignorance.
Despite people complaining.
There's I'm pretty happy with the state of the game Street Fighter's in. I mean, JP, he can get his nerf. Luke can get his nerf. Anything that's kind of broken can get fixed. I don't mind that. But other than that, there's not much I hate about the drive rush system or the parry system. I know a lot of people hate drive rush jab, neutral drive rush jab, and I totally get that because it's hard to react to. And if you do react to it and you're fast enough to react to it, you get punished for being fast enough to react to it, and it's tough. But I don't know. Let's see what he got to say.
A lot about JP. That character has 3 representatives in Capcom Cup, so it's very clear that people have found a way, despite that matchup. What I like to call it is like unstable. I think the character like has an unstable match.
My thoughts on medium punch on Jury pushing people further is that's tough. It's big part of her game plan, and that's going to be kind of tough. So let's see. Let's see how that pans out. So ignorance, that's a good question. So ignorance is alluding to, should we listen to high level players because there's so very few of them, or do we listen to everybody else? And I think we listen to high level players. That's me personally. I think we listen to high level players. If you want a healthy game, you want a not broken game, then you want the game to be in a state where things are balanced. And I think nobody understands the balance of the game better than high level players. That's just me personally. So. Nothing. You tripping with that? We don't need to be nerfing Jerry. She's not that great.
Matchup because of amnesia. People still have found a way to be able to deal with some of the stuff that he presents on the table. Even Ken. I know Ken players like to joke that he's like 6 or 7. I think people have started to figure out some stuff about Ken, but that still doesn't mean those characters.
Ignorance. Over time, though, over longer periods of time, I think you definitely want to have the game in a balanced state, in a truly balanced state.
Aren't strong or that they've slid. It's just that I think we've gotten better at dealing with them, and so I think now more players are able to get to doing some semblance of mind games, because at the end of the day, regardless of who you're looking at, and I try to watch a lot of Street Fighter 6. At the end of the day,
exactly. No soul. If you give it a longer period of time, it ends up ruining the game for a lot of people.
But this is where the game is going to be until they patch it, or even until they release more characters, because I think a lot of characters right now, they cover a lot of the same territory in terms of how they're supposed to be played.
You're referring to a little bit more of like the button drive rush, or sorry, low forward drive rush, or fireball drive rush. You mean those things?
Those were kind of it, but like more so how they're played, right? So I think Knuckle has said this before, that if you didn't learn, I think it was Knuckle. I don't.
Nah, ignorance. See, the thing is, the things that are broken about certain fighting games are not hard things to abuse. So typically they'll be like simple 2-button interactions or things like that, or like maybe even like an attack, one particular character's button that is just a broken button. It just provides way more value than it should, or a sequence of buttons that provide way more value than they should. I think we want to eliminate those as much as possible.
I don't know. It might have been a different top player, but I'm just gonna say, dude, if you don't use Jury's level 2, no, I know it was Big Bird. If you don't use Jury's level 2, then you're playing a worse version of Cammy. And as someone that plays Jury, I kind of agree, because they kind of do the same thing. They both knock you down and they strike throw you, right? They have similar damage output, and then their whole game.
Yo, G, welcome in, fam.
That's 90% of the cast, but how they do it specifically, like going from neutral to strike throw you, is almost pretty similar. And so a lot of characters do kind of function like that in this game with this base roster. And so until they add more characters, I think this is where the kind of the staleness comes from. It just feels the same because everyone's sort of kind of doing the same thing, but it just looks slightly different. DJ's still strike throwing you, but how he strike throws you is different from, like I said, how Cammy and Jury's doing it. At the end of the day, he's still throw, but he's doing sway into 60% damage. That's the only thing that changes. Ken's still doing the same thing. Throw, oh, you're in the corner, throw. You tag, stand fierce, and the shimmy.
I agree with you.
Yeah.
But the other end of that, I kind of feel like that's what Street Fighter identity. No? Do you not feel that way? I don't feel as though the mix comes from left to right or overhead lows. I think this game focuses primarily on strike throw.
I think that's more so a 5 and 6 thing, because in 4 it wasn't more so a strike throw thing. 4 was a heavy set play game, and that's where actually initially attracted me to Ibuki, was the fact that her set play was like when she knocked you down, she was, oh, here's kunai, 50-50 guess. I'm not sure about like third strike, but 4 it was more so a set play game. And 5 and 6, that's where they kind of transitioned to making the game more strike throw as opposed to set playing your opponent to death, because ironically people didn't like set play.
Okay, let's break down Ignorance's question. He said, if everyone but the top 1% are having fun, should we listen to the 1%? That's a good question. Chat. Think about that. Think about that, chat.
So they said it was scrubby, it was dumb. They hated Vortex, they hated unblockables, and so they removed that. So now people are like, well, the game is boring. Well, you removed all the cool stuff that characters could do, and that made characters kind of stand out with their mix-up. The Akuma Vortex was different than a Ibuki Vortex. You were getting mixed, but you were getting mixed differently. So you had to learn how to deal with those setups differently. The characters were doing the same thing in terms of set play, but then you
okay, I have the answer. Here's the answer. If the game we're talking about, if that game and that franchise and that company plans to take their game to esports level, then yes, we have to listen to the top 1%. If you plan to have consumers watching professional players play, the professional players have to play in a non-broken environment. Shank also brings up a good point. A competitive game can't be 100% casual friendly. And I agree with that. The top 1% matters if you're trying to sell the product to people watching. If you're trying to get viewers, if you're trying to sell competitive play between the top 1% to viewers, then their opinion matters.
You also had characters like fundamentally sound, like Ryu. Ryu was like the fundamentally sound. But then you had Evil Ryu, who was almost similarly fundamentally sound, but he had higher damage, right? So characters had uniqueness to them when it came to where you could classify them as in Street Fighter 4. In 5, it's like it's now in 6, but towards the end, more characters kind of were doing.
Yo, an example of this is Overwatch. If you look at the character Bastion in Overwatch, his hitbox is just so damn big that they refuse to make him good. If they made him good, No, he's so big that, okay, you have people on the low bottom tier saying that he's shredding them, right? And then you have players that say that he's useless. And then you have players that say that his hitbox is so big that he'll never be good. If you buff Bastion, then the people in the low tier get shredded by him. But Bastion is currently useless in the high tier. So it's like, how do you balance that?
Different things because they added more characters and they added more unique ways characters could do stuff, and so that's why I say that like, they need to add more characters, and the characters need to be completely unique. Aki was a step in the right direction. What she does, I think, from the cast, she's a completely different character than most. She feels different. She doesn't feel like a base roster character. I feel like almost a lot of the base roster just feels the same, and they cover the same space. I'm hoping Ed changes that as well too. Even Rashid feels a little bit different too, because he has
Rashid is different.
And hoping Akuma changes that, right? And so once they start adding more characters, I think it will be a lot better. Where we are right now, the meta set is not going to change. We're all going to be doing the same thing until they decide to patch, and then they add more characters.
Yo, okay. So shout out to Narukami 2D for the video. I think we had a great discussion over this. So the answer, ignorance. So I have about 1,100 hours in Street Fighter, and to be honest with you, I don't feel like I can speak on the game with authority. There's a lot of knowledge behind a game, behind a singular fighting game. One like Street Fighter especially. There is so many nuances to Street Fighter. It's crazy. So chat. Do we have any opinions before I ask what I'm about to ask? The way I look at ignorance, is that if we listen to the person who has the correct opinion. There is no correct opinion. And if there was a correct opinion, Overwatch would have balanced Bastion in a way that made everyone happy. Jury does not need a nerf. She's not winning any majors.
You win. Perfect.